Everyone, welcome to tonight's Heritage Register Public Information Center. This is for Phase C of the Heritage Register project, which is for Eagle Place. My name is Patrick Booser. I'm a planner with Long Range Planning here at the City of Brantford's Planning Department, and I am the team lead for the city on this project. For the Heritage Register project, the city retained Archaeological Services Incorporated to assist with the project. I'm joined tonight by some staff from ASI. You'll be seeing a presentation tonight by Annie Veilleux, and moderating and facilitating the presentation will be Rebecca Sierra. This information center is being recorded, so if you have any questions tonight that you don't get answered, feel free to follow up with me, and we can answer any of those questions. This will be posted to the City of Brantford's Neighbourhood Planning YouTube page. Information on that will be contained in the notice you received and can also be accessed from the City of Brantford's website under Neighbourhood Planning Meetings. I'll turn this over now to Rebecca and Annie.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rebecca Sierra. I'm from ASI. I'm a partner with the firm and director of our firm's Cultural Heritage Division. As Patrick mentioned, I will be facilitating the discussion tonight. So before we jump into a presentation provided by Annie Veilleux, I just want to go over some housekeeping, as well as just general layout for the evening. So we're gathered here tonight virtually. The session is being recorded. We're here to share factual information about the results of the work that's been completed over the last several years. We're here to answer any questions any of the attendees may have about the process and results, and overall here to facilitate discussion and listen to the range of views and opinions and provide a forum for hearing them, responding to them, and documenting them. As part of the presentation that Annie will be providing to walk everyone through the work that has occurred and which supports the results of the work and the recommendations, we'll also be identifying next steps and contact information. I'll be turning it over to Annie in a moment. I'll be sharing my screen of the presentation that will be occurring. But when we get to the question and answer period, after Annie's presentation, individuals can raise their hand for specific questions or provide questions or comments through the chat function. Whatever your comfort is, we'll figure out a way to hear it from you if you have questions or comments tonight. Any housekeeping questions before we begin from anyone on the call? Okay, I'm just gonna check the chat. I think we're good. So I'm gonna share my screen and just one moment and we'll get started. Okay, so Annie, let me know when you'd like me to advance.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca. So yes, thank you everyone for being with us tonight to go over Phase C of this project. Next slide, please. We've already done a brief introduction. My name is Annie Veilleux. I am the project manager from the consulting side on this project, and I will be giving you this presentation tonight. Next slide, please. And as mentioned, we'll have a presentation. We'll go through what are heritage registers, the goals of heritage registers. We'll go through the project background for this particular project that has been going on for the past few years, and providing you a brief the project methodology and how the properties being addressed tonight were identified and evaluated and recommended for inclusion on the heritage register. Okay, next slide, please. So to begin, we would like to provide information on municipal heritage registers. We will look at the benefits to the community of a heritage register and the implications of inclusion on a heritage register for a property owner. Next slide, please. A heritage register is a statutory requirement under the Ontario Heritage Act. The Heritage Register is kept by the clerk of the municipality and must include properties that have been designated for their individual cultural heritage value or interest under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, or groups of properties that have collective cultural heritage value or interest under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Properties protected in this way are called designated properties. So a heritage register may include properties that have not been designated under Part 4 or 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, but are believed to be of cultural heritage value or interest. These properties are often referred to as listed properties. Today's meeting is to discuss your property becoming a non-designated property on the City of Brantford's Heritage Register. To add or remove non-designated properties from the Heritage Register, council approval in consultation with the Municipal Heritage Committee is required. Next slide, please. So there are many benefits to a community of including non-designated properties on the Heritage Register. A Heritage Register supports the City of Brantford's policies for cultural heritage conservation. It identifies the cultural heritage resources that are valued by a community and identifies and recognizes the different types of heritage across Brantford's various neighborhoods. Next slide. Including non-designated properties on the Heritage Register provides the city with a way to identify it in a transparent way and to monitor properties of potential heritage value. These properties may require special attention in the development review process. Inclusion on the Heritage Register also ensures interim protection from demolition. Next slide. The Heritage Register provides accessible, comprehensive information about heritage properties that can be used by many people, including developers, planners, community groups, tourism associations, educators, municipal staff, and private citizens. Next slide. Depending on how our property is included on a Heritage Register, there are different implications. For designated properties, so those recognized as having cultural heritage value or interest through Part 4 or Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, a municipal bylaw is registered on the title of the designated property. When a demolition permit is submitted, the city has up to 90 days to review and make a decision to approve with conditions, or refuse the permit. And for alterations or renovations that may affect the designated property's heritage attribute, a heritage permit is required. For non-designated or listed properties, which is the focus of the protection we are discussing tonight, there are no legal documents registered on the title of the property. When a demolition permit is submitted, the city has up to 60 days to review and consider options for conservation. If a decision is not made within 60 days, then the demolition permit is processed normally. And for alterations or renovations, a heritage permit is not required. Next slide. Okay, so now that we've had a look at how a municipal register works, we would like to take you through the history of the City of Brantford's Heritage Register project. Next slide. In the 1990s, the City of Brantford started identifying properties with potential cultural heritage value. These properties were documented through an informal inventory, and over the following 25 years, thousands of properties were added to this inventory. Throughout the years, various methods were used to identify, document, and evaluate properties that were added to the inventory. This was a common practice in Ontario as a way to proactively understand properties that were potentially valued in a community. In 2005, the Ontario Heritage Act was amended to enable properties to be included on a municipal heritage register as non-designated. This amendment also enabled the review of demolition permits. The City of Brantford identified a need to review their informal inventory to confirm which properties should be recommended to move onto the Heritage Register through a council-approved process. So ASI was retained in late 2017 to review and evaluate the informal inventory, which has over 9,000 properties. Next slide. The key objectives of the project were to conduct background research, to review the existing heritage inventory using a consistent methodology, to evaluate properties using criteria that reflect Brantford's unique heritage and which are based on Ontario Regulation 906 of the Ontario Heritage Act, to provide recommendations for properties to be included on the Heritage Register, to provide a user-friendly, accessible database to house the Heritage Register, and to consult with the public. Next slide. Part 1 of the project was completed in 2 phases between 2018 and 2020. That part of the project included a review of the existing heritage inventory, consultation with the public, as well as the Municipal Heritage Committee, historical research, the development of a thematic framework, identification of character areas, screening, field survey, and evaluation. That work recommended 832 properties for inclusion on the Heritage Register as non-designated or listed properties. In August 2020, Council approved the listing of 98 priority properties which have been included on the Heritage Register. We began part 2 of the project in the summer of 2021. Tonight's meeting is part of the third of 8 phases that will be carried out through this year and conclude in 2023. Each phase consists of consultation with property owners prior to properties being presented to the Municipal Heritage Committee and Council for a decision. Next slide, please. The next part of the presentation is to take you through the work that was conducted that resulted in the recommendation at the end of part 1 of the project. Tools were developed to officially evaluate 9,000 plus properties to determine which properties should be included as non-designated listed properties on the Heritage Register. The approach was systematic and rigorous. Next slide. So to gain an understanding of the individual properties and their context, work was carried out at 3 different scales. At the citywide scale, a thematic framework was developed to understand the key significant themes across the city, when they happened, and why they happened where they did. The city was then divided up into neighborhoods based on local understanding of neighborhood divisions and the development pattern of how areas in the city became part of the city. At this neighborhood scale was identified where the themes occurred and what they looked like for different neighborhoods. For example, residential development may look quite different in one part of the city than another because of when that development took place. With these pieces in place, the individual properties were then reviewed to standardize the inventory data for the purpose of comparison and evaluation. The understanding of the cities and city areas' important themes could then be applied to each property. Next slide. During part 1 of the project, there were several points of contact with the community and stakeholders. The project team met with members of the 6 Nations of the Grand River Consultation and Accommodation Policy team and staff of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation Department of Consultation and Accommodation. There were 2 public information centers, which were advertised for anyone in the city to attend. At the first public information center, community members were asked questions about the history of the city, and they identified properties that may be of cultural heritage value through a mapping exercise. The second public information center presented similar information to tonight's presentation on the project, including the methodology and the recommendations. Requests for input from relevant public agencies, heritage organizations, and cultural groups were made. Information was shared about the project on the city's website, and meetings were held with the Brantford Heritage Committee, and a city area workshop was held with the Heritage Committee's Education Subcommittee. Additional properties that were not on the existing heritage inventory were identified as part of the engagement process and integrated into the project. Next slide, please. Part 1 of the project also involved the identification of significant historical themes and development of an understanding of how and where these themes have expressed themselves over time. The development of a citywide thematic history framework provided the basic contextual structure for the systematic and consistent inventory and evaluation of properties in terms of their relationships to significant events, trends, and periods in Brantford's history of built form types. Within the thematic framework, important periods, events, and patterns of development were identified and organized into thematic categories: agricultural, industrial, residential, civic and institutional, and commercial. The thematic framework was also structured around a chronology of the city's development, focusing on the significant periods that defined and shaped the city as a whole, from its earliest indigenous land uses to the 21st century. Key events and trends for each thematic category were identified. Next slide. A primary objective of part 1 of the project was the identification of how and where the city of Brantford's significant development themes physically materialized. This was achieved by linking time periods, key development themes, and associated land uses and built forms with specific areas in the city. This framework provides a system to reliably and consistently understand any building's potential cultural heritage value without requiring extensive knowledge about an individual building. By using location, architectural styles, basic built form information, and prospective building ages, large numbers of properties were then organized and prioritized into categories of known and potential cultural heritage value. Through research and analysis, the city of Brantford was divided into 26 areas and assigned a corresponding name. These units are referred to as city areas. For the purposes of part 2 of the project, city areas have been grouped into priority areas, both of which are shown on the map. Next slide, please. The goal of screening properties was to ensure that only those properties that had potential to be eligible for listing on the Heritage Register and or were of community interest were documented during field survey and reviewed for evaluation. Screening criteria was developed to capture properties that would best exemplify and communicate the history of Brantford. The criteria that were developed were designed to reflect community interest, communicate Brantford's history, and represent the breadth of building stock within the city. If a property met at least one of the screening criteria, it moved on to field survey. If a property did not meet any criterion, it did not move on for further assessment. Next slide. Field survey was conducted between May and August 2019 for all properties that met at least one of the screening criteria. In total, nearly 4,000 properties were surveyed. The goal of the field survey was to photograph the current existing conditions of each property and to update existing property information. The photographs were taken during field survey were then used to assess the material integrity for each property. Next slide. Integrity, as defined in the Ontario Heritage Toolkit on Evaluation, is the authenticity of a historical resource's physical identity, evidenced by the remaining characteristics that existed during the resource's period of significance. A scale of low, sufficient, and exceptional was used. Generally, a property that has low integrity retains few or no character-defining features and or has been substantially altered. Also, generally, a property that has sufficient integrity will retain a majority of its character-defining features and will retain enough aspects of integrity to convey its significance. Replacement materials may be present so long as they do not affect the overall integrity of design. Similarly, if an addition is present, to be considered sufficient, it must be subordinate to the overall character of the building. Increased age and rarity of the property type may also lower the threshold required for sufficient integrity. Generally, a property that has exceptional integrity will retain all of its character-defining features and will rate highly in all aspects of integrity. A property with exceptional integrity will have undergone few or no alterations since its original construction and will not have been moved from its original location. Additions are either not present or minimally visible from the right-of-way. It should be noted that a property that has a lower integrity rating due to alteration or degradation of original materials can still retain heritage interest or value. Material integrity is one of the many factors considered in evaluating a property's heritage value. Next slide. Any property that was determined to have sufficient or exceptional integrity then moved forward to evaluation. It should be noted that all properties that made it through the screening process, including those with low integrity, have the potential to retain cultural heritage value or interest. Focusing the evaluation process on properties of sufficient and exceptional integrity, however, provides the opportunity for prioritization of the strongest candidates for listing. The evaluation process was used to establish which criteria properties met, with each property having the potential to meet one or more of the evaluation criteria. Properties in the evaluation phase were measured against each other at the evaluation criteria. Each of the evaluation criteria based on available historical information on the existing heritage inventory and physical and contextual data collected during the field survey. So we look at design and physical criteria, such as if a property is an early date of construction for the city of Brantford or within a city area, if it's a rare vanishing type through the city or within a city area, whether it's a rare, representative, or unique architectural style design. We'll also look at historical associative criteria, looking at associations with significant organizations, architects, or notable person or event. Contextual criteria that we looked at was whether a property was located at an intersection and designated for its corner lot, or a corner commercial property in a primarily residential neighborhood, or associated with a specific type of development within an area. Next slide, please. Using the evaluation criteria and material integrity in combination allows the opportunity to identify which properties are the strongest candidates for inclusion on the Heritage Register. Strong candidates are those properties that meet multiple evaluation criteria and are of exceptional or sufficient material integrity. Equally strong candidates are those properties that retain exceptional or sufficient material integrity and are at a greater risk of loss. Properties which have a greater risk of loss are those that naturally have fewer properties that they reflect unique, rare, or vanishing styles or types, or are part of a collection of properties which have value as a group. Next slide, please. For part 2 of the project, the Phase C properties are shown in dark gray on the map. The properties were identified as strong candidates for inclusion on the Heritage Register as non-designated listed properties. Next slide. So just to review, inclusion on the Heritage Register as a non-designated listed property means there are no legal documents registered on the title of the property. Should you apply for a demolition permit, the city has up to 60 days to review and consider options for conservation. However, if this decision is not made within 60 days, then the demolition permit is processed normally. When you're making alterations or renovations to your property, a heritage permit is not required. Next slide, please. So following this presentation, there will be an opportunity to ask questions this evening, and there's an ongoing opportunity to speak with Patrick, who is the planner of the city, he introduced himself at the beginning of the meeting. His contact information is shown on the screen. Following tonight's meeting, there will be several meetings at which this phase of the project will also be discussed. So on March 28th, the city will be presenting to the Brantford Heritage Committee. Then on April 12th, the report will be provided to the Committee of the Whole, Community Development for consideration. Following that, Council will make a decision at their April 26th meeting. Should you wish to do so, written comments received by March 21st will be provided to Council for their consideration. So I hope this presentation has provided you with the information you need to understand why your property is recommended for inclusion on the Heritage Register. And I will turn it back to Rebecca, who will facilitate the Q&A session, next part of the project, the meeting, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Annie. I'm just going to open up the chat, and I see that a question that came in earlier has been responded to. So any questions from attendees? You can either unmute your microphone and provide us with your question, or raise your hand like this. See, my hand is raised above my face, or you can put a question in the chat.
I see we have two, Jason and Walter. I think Jason had his hand up first. So I'm gonna allow Jason, go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Annie. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I just had one quick question about the demolition permit, if you are a listed property. You said that they had council had to make that decision within 60 days. I was just interested in what decisions can be made. Is it a simple yes or no? Or could one of the decisions be, we would like to review this further and just tack on extra time onto that 60-day limit? You know what I mean?
I can answer that. So that 60-day time frame, it's a notice. So you would, if you are planning to demolish a building on your property and your property is listed, you have to give the city a notice of that intent. But that's not, that notice doesn't result in a yes or no decision. It's purely a 60-day time frame, after which you can apply for a demolition permit normally, and the normal rules surrounding it will apply. There's no council decision to be made on that notice. I mean, like, so they can't approve it or deny it. But the decision could be, you know, if a property has high heritage value, yeah, council can make a decision to issue a notice of intention to designate the property, and that's a different process under the act. Okay. If it was a development application, let's say someone is redeveloping a parcel and looking to add in, let's say, a 4-story apartment building. Well, the discussion could result that, oh, you know, the developer might change their plans a little bit to incorporate and adaptively reuse the building on the listed property. And maybe in that case, there is no notice of intention to designate. So again, there's no yes or no decision. It's what, you know, options might you come to a conclusion on with the property owner.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Jason, for that question. Let's go to Walter next. He has his hand raised, and then there's a question in the chat we'll go to after.
All right, so Walter, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, could you answer the questions I set out in the chat prior? Did you get that?
So the question was, what is ASI?
Yeah, that one too.
I see one question in the chat.
Hang on, what is ASI?
Yeah, Rebecca, right?
Sure. So Walter, Annie, do you want to respond to that in terms of background about the company and the team here?
Sure. So ASI is Archaeological Services Inc. This is the consultant team,
I'm
our
sorry,
team.
I want to write that down. What is it called? The name of the company called?
It's called ASI or Archaeological Services Inc.
Okay.
And we were retained by the city of Brantford to conduct this study. So we are the consultant team that was hired to do this study. So our team, we are part of a large cultural heritage division within the company, and our work focuses on above ground heritage, this type of project. We work for municipalities, we work for
Okay, I get that part of it. I was just kind
okay,
of wondering about the name, but you bring up an interesting point. How much was the contract for with Brantford?
So I'll put that question to Patrick to confirm kind of what information we can disclose here as a matter of
Yeah.
Well, it
public
should be
record.
public knowledge, right? Because it was an open tender, right?
So there was a budget report. I don't have the number with me right now, but it's something I can certainly follow up on. I believe I have some of your contact information from your registration, so I can reach out to you and we can discuss that a bit more if you'd like.
Annie, you have no idea how much your company's got paid for this?
I don't have that information in front of me right now.
And was it a year-long contract?
We were hired the contract in at the end of 2017. So part one of the project, which was doing all the background research and the putting
So
together
it's been how many years?
So the first part of the project, which was for putting together the methodology and reviewing these 9,000 properties and field work on 4,000 properties and doing the evaluation that led to the recommendation, wrapped up in 2020. So from
3 years for that first part, right?
yes, yeah. Well, we'd have to check it was at the end of 2017
Just
ballpark. And now, right now, what we're doing is we started in summer of 2021, fall of 2021 for this part of the project where for the 800 some properties that were recommended for listing have been separated by in city areas, and we're approaching it in different areas and at as groups so that there's a better opportunity to talk to more people at once. If we were trying to have consultation with all 800 property owners, that would be, we wouldn't have a chance to have this one-on-one chance to talk. So that's why the city decided to approach these in groups. So right now we're in group 3 of 8 that we're going through over the next 2 years.
Wow, that's a big project.
Yes.
So what is the advantage to the owner, the landlord, to having his property designated?
Well, so so again, this is not the full designation process. A lot of people do think of designation when they think of heritage properties. Those are the properties that need the heritage permits for alterations and changes. The listing process, it recognizes that there is some cultural heritage value to the property, that it has some contribution to the community's history, or that it has exceptional architecture, or is part of the character of an area. But this is a much less thorough sort of regime of controls. Again, it only deals with the notice of intention to demolish.
So how does
it recognizes it for the owner?
How does that positively affect the landowner?
I don't have the exact title of the study. I know there's been some studies that show properties that are designated tend to retain their value between sales. Again, I'd have to go and find the link to that study, but again, it's a form of recognition of the history of that property or its character contributions to the neighborhood.
So how does that help the landlord?
To the landlord?
The property owner. How does that help him?
I see my manager is joining in as well. Sorry,
Yeah.
if you have something to add.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Waterfield, Manager of Long Range Planning for the city. I just thought I'd jump in here to help answer Walter's question in terms of, what are the impacts of your property being listed on the Heritage Register. And, really the answer is there's really not that much of an impact unless you want to demolish your property, in which case the process and the procedure for assessing and dealing with the demolition permit might take a bit longer than it would otherwise. Listed properties aren't necessarily designated properties. So as was stated in the presentation earlier, by having your property added to the list, it isn't anything that's going to be indicated on your title. It doesn't present any new requirements in terms of needing a heritage permit were you to want to make some alterations to your property. Whereas if your property was designated, then you would need to apply for heritage permits that would be approved by our heritage committee and staff. So,
Okay, so I understand that there's really no advantage to the property owner.
really,
So surely there's some advantage to the taxpayer.
it really flags the property as having some significance, so that, if there is a development or a demolition proposed, we just have a bit more time to assess how we want to deal with that. And as Patrick said, council could provide us with direction to issue a notice of intent to demolish, or
So
just
having more time to assess the demolition permit, should there be one, it helps the taxpayer?
It helps the city in terms of its interest in retaining its heritage assets.
But how does that help the taxpayer?
We're thinking from a tax base, a dollars and cents perspective approach, Walter.
Well, what does the taxpayer get for his money for this?
Right. So this is more towards the intangibles, that community character, that community history, and recognizing that, the community it's its people, but it's also the shape of its neighborhoods.
So there's no real advantage to the taxpayer then?
It maintains that community character, which helps some people. That's what
Well,
makes
with the
them
community,
still live.
but the building's still there. The
Right.
community character is the same. And yet we're spending an awful lot of money to count these buildings and categorize them.
Well, it's not the dollars and cents of it. It's preserving the cultural heritage of the city, which has an
Perhaps if you're a
intangible
taxpayer,
value.
you'd have an interest in the dollars and cents of it.
Yeah, but that's not the only evaluating factor to consider here. What's the price of a heritage building, and ensuring that we're preserving the cultural heritage of Brantford. So again, the whole purpose of the register was to identify those properties that have the potential to exhibit cultural heritage values so that we can protect them. And this project has taken 9,000 properties that were put on a heritage inventory over time, and has given them a systematic, rigorous analysis to whittle that down to the properties that have the most significance. There's about 832, I think, was the number that we're adding through this process. So
What's the cost per unit for that? What was the cost for those 832 to come through and be of interest to you?
Well, there wouldn't be any sort of relevant cost per unit. Again, it's the value in undertaking this exercise to preserve City of Brantford's cultural heritage. So,
and who's deemed it to be valuable?
So this has gone through council, and the
Council.
budget line is set by the council of the city.
Is council aware of these costs?
Yes. So
yes, council approved the budget for this project.
And do you know what it is? Do you know what that number is?
I can't recall that number offhand, but as Patrick said, he can forward that to you. Well,
Okay, yeah, I would
look into
appreciate that very much, Patrick, if you could do that.
Yeah. So Walter, there is a public staff report that went through a committee process and then to council for a final decision. So that can be shared with you.
yeah, the number.
I would like that, yeah.
Okay, We have some other questions in the chat. Walter, were there any other questions aside from those that you've run through?
Not at this time. I'll wait
Okay.
for Patrick's information. And at that time, Patrick, maybe I'll get back to you if I have any further questions. But
Okay.
I'll stand by and listen to the others. And if I need to speak up, I'll put my hand up.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. So we have a question in the chat from Stefan, and the first is noting that Stefan is a property representative of property listed, a representative from the Redeeming Grace Reformed Church, and the church building itself is made up of several portions built at different times and with differing styles. And then there's a follow-up in the chat from Stefan with the following question. Is the purpose of this process effectively to establish a database of buildings with heritage significance in order for the city to track them and make future considerations regarding the building? And I think I'll put that to Patrick maybe first as it relates to city process.
Thanks, Rebecca. So Jason, fundamentally, yes, the purpose of the Heritage Register is to be that list, that database of the properties that are the best examples of cultural heritage, those properties that contribute to the city's history and its various aspects. And in the case of that church, it's that, civic, religious history. What are the faith groups that came to call Brantford home? But also it is a good representative of its architectural style. It shows adaptive reuse of historic church from the late 1800s and how that building was adaptively reused or adaptively expanded over time with various distinctive architectural styles. And I'll just pull up the chat just to make sure I think I answered the question, the rest of the question. And yes, it does influence future considerations regarding the building.
And then there's a follow-up question from Stefan about this particular property, asking, wondering if the building or the property is technically listed, as the building is made up of multiple portions, which is a great question. And Patrick or Annie, who wants to take that as it sort of gets into some of the details about the property?
I'm happy to answer that. So
Okay.
the Heritage Act runs with property, not just the structures on the property. So when we list the property, it identifies. Sorry, Walter, we can hear you. I'm just going to mute you for a second, okay? And then you can raise your hand if you have future questions. I think it's just
Okay, thank you.
background
Thank you
noise.
very much.
Sorry about that. So yeah, so the Heritage Act deals with real property. When we list a property, it's the whole property, not just one building or a portion of it. But we can identify which buildings or features of the property contribute to its heritage value.
Is there anything further, Annie, you wanted to add to that at all?
No, I think Patrick answered
Great.
everything.
Okay, we have another question coming into the chat from Jason. If my property meets the criteria and ultimately approved, will it automatically be included in the list? So this relates to sort of process and next steps. And Patrick, maybe we'll start with you.
Yeah, so tonight's meeting, this is the information portion. All the properties that are flagged for listing in this phase, those properties, you'll see a property information sheet was given to you in the mail. We provide those information sheets to our Heritage Committee and then ultimately to City Council. And Council makes that decision whether to list the property, to add it to the Heritage Register, or to not add it to the register. So by being identified tonight, it's not automatic, but these are the properties that are recommended by staff and by ASI for listing. And when they get provided to the Heritage Committee, the committee can also add its comments. Does it recommend a property be listed, or perhaps does it recommend against certain properties? It's not automatic, but these are the best examples.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm just looking in the chat. There's no other questions coming through there, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So I'll maybe just put it out to everyone on the call. Any other questions or comments for the team here or the city? Okay, I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything. So I'm just going to share my screen again and put Patrick's contact.
We
We
Walter
have
just
Walter.
Yep.
Okay, so before I do that, we'll unmute. Actually, Patrick, are you able to unmute?
Annie,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find your company on Google. It's Architectural Services Incorporated.
if you Google ASI Heritage, it should come up.
And where is that located?
The company, we're based out of Toronto and Burlington.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. I should be able to find it easily that way. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Can you mute me again, please?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen to share Patrick's contact information again and just do a recap on the next steps coming from here. Just bear with me a moment. I think everyone should see my screen here. So any further comments can be provided to Patrick and/or further follow-up from the questions and discussion we've had tonight. His email information on the screen in front of you, as well as his contact information via telephone. And then in terms of next steps, presentation to the Brantford Heritage Committee on March 28th, presentation to Committee of the Whole, Community Development on April 12th, and then a decision by Council on April 26th. And of course, written comments received by March 21st will be provided to Council for consideration. So with that, I want to thank everyone for their questions and comments, all the very good questions and comments put to the team tonight, and for your attendance. We have one more question coming in that I'll just read to the group. So this is from Stefan. This is a very good question as well. Would a building ever be unlisted? Is a reevaluation ever completed? And I'll put that to Patrick to start as it relates to the city's process, as it relates to the Ontario Heritage Act.
At this time, we don't have a formal relisting schedule. We're first getting through the delisting portion of the Heritage Register project, but we are reevaluating all the properties that were originally flagged. At any time, an owner of a listed property can provide an objection to council and request that their property be removed. Just under the Act, we first consult with the Heritage Committee and we provide their comments as well as those of the owner to council for council's decision on whether to leave the property that is listed on the Heritage Register or to remove it.
Thank you, Patrick. So no other questions or final comments incoming. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone again for coming tonight and for your comments and feedback. And with that, I think we'll conclude the event. Patrick or Annie or other representatives from the city, any closing remarks before we adjourn for the evening?
Just want to say thank you everyone for joining us tonight and hear what we have to say, and you're asking some very great questions. So thanks for your time.
Actually, I do think I thought I saw one more question, but anyone who had a question that wasn't able to ask it tonight, please feel free to email me again. If you have the notice, you have my contact information. Those who are watching, you can also navigate to the City of Brantford's Heritage Register Project webpage. And again, feel free to contact me there and I can answer any questions you have about the project.
Okay, thank you everyone and have a good night.
Thank you.